Three, two, one, let's go.
This is Post Feed'em, and you are watching the Board No More Network.
All right, we are currently live with our dear brother, Neil. Welcome to the show yet again, my friend. How are you?
Good. I feel like we were just talking just a minute ago.
Really? Especially for me, because I've been editing it like on and off for the last couple of days. I feel like I super know you.
I'm sorry, bro. Bro, I got to say, I love what you did with the edit. Like, it's if everything you would hope for in a podcast. Your instincts, thanks. Your timing. It was cool, man. Like, yeah, you're awesome. I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad you invited me on.
Oh, well, no, I'm thank you. I don't know what else to say about that. I'm going to be doing a couple more edits actually while we're done. So I'll start tagging you on Instagram and all the rest of the places, and we'll get your music out there. And we'll make sure everybody finds Dirt Poor Robins on every platform and everywhere you are.
You're the best, man.
How you doing today?
Oh my gosh, I'm having a great day. Yeah. It's getting better every day, man. It's getting better every day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty good. Kind of a little overwhelmed. Got a lot on our plates, but it's all good. It's all good. I can't complain at all. I'm blessed.
That's awesome.
Okay, so before we get going or get started, did you have anything that you wanted to comment on after hearing our conversation for the second time? How did you want to go about this? I have some ideas, but
it's funny because, when you're listening back, you have like all these branches. Like when anytime someone asks you a question, it opens up possibilities. Like it's a tree. The question's like a tree, and then it opens up these branches. And it's like, do I want to go into the dark side or I want to go into the bright side? Like both things are necessary, and there's like the kind of like teetering back and forth. And but then also I think of all the things. I have like maybe 8 hours of examples on any of those questions we could have answered. So there's a lot more to be said, but no, I don't have anything to say about it. I was happy with our conversation. I like the way you're thinking. I think I think you're asking the right questions. It drew some good stuff out of me. And sometimes I find myself struggling in interviews to be like, well, I know what they want for their channel, but what would I really say right now? I felt none of that when I was talking to you. I was like, I felt like I'm just talking to, I'm not even talking to an audience. I'm talking to you, and you're talking to me, and we're talking about the things that are beautiful and important to us. So, that we've the truth we've tasted, and we're talking about those things. So that was a pleasure.
Oh, wow. That is usually my goal, is kind of to make it feel just like a conversation. I'm not really interested in what I can ask or what I can say to kind of up the view count or any of that stuff. I just want to have a good conversation. I think that's something that we're lacking as a culture. Not to say that it doesn't exist, but I think that we don't put as much emphasis on conversation, and that's my goal. Yeah,
because even a lot of things that are phrased as conversation are just content.
Yes, sir.
That's what they are. It's like...
Oh. Yes.
In that I'm like, well, I wish I had that hour of my life back after I watched that. So,
man, I know, and I'm so tired of it. Like we're swimming in a sea of mediocrity. A lack of substance. And that's why I really appreciate the conversations I get to have. Specifically, the conversation we had, because we really dug into some stuff. I've spoken to a few musicians, but. The type of musician you are, I can relate to. So it was a little bit different for me, because some other musicians I've talked to, we're not exactly doing, but I can relate with what you're doing, how you're digging internally, externally. You're kind of thinking of yourself, the product, and the audience. The product meaning like your art that you're creating. And I think I really like how you present it and how you think it through. So to me, it was a pleasure, that conversation, and I'm sure we're gonna have many in the future.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that'd be great.
So one of the questions I wanted to start off before I start taking questions from the audience. So everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, please throw them in. Manny's gonna start it, and then we'll bring them up on the screen. But it got me thinking, the conversation we had about like a time long gone, long past, and that was like the record store. And it was kind of like now when we find information, whether or art or any of that stuff, we're kind of doing it online first. And if we happen to leave our house, maybe we go out looking for something, but that's even rare. But back in our day, you have to leave your house. You had to like go to a store. You had to like participate in the community. And it kind of reminded me of something you said in ortho Orthocast with Kyle when you're talking about cities and the church was replaced by the factory and that communal living. Do you miss those days? How do you view that? Like the whole church of music?
Well, that's not something. So that for me, like when I talk about those days, that falls in more to the category of an idea than an experience, a full experience of that, in the sense that we are in a consumeristic, product-driven culture. This is the pickle jar I've pickled in, man, and it's a struggle once you realize it. So because you can ruin the thing in front of you for the thing you wish was there, instead.
Yes.
So
yes.
I have to be careful when I talk about those things and think about those things, because we need to talk about them, right? But we don't want to get stuck in a pattern of like, oh, let's just say, make something great again. I don't mean that in like a diss on Trump either. I mean that in the sense that there's like, hey, let's return to the halcyon days of old. It's like, well, which day do you want to return to? The 1950s? It's like, okay, well, that's a cul-de-sac. That's going to loop us right back to where we were. So how far back do you want to go? The problem isn't that we haven't gone back far enough. The problem is that we haven't gone forward far enough yet. And, because that problem is solved in the eschaton. So, we have to realize the water we've been drinking, the spices that have been flavoring us, and come to terms with the fact that we're not going to know necessarily right away why we want the things we want. And we're going to think they're good things we want that aren't actually good, because our tastes have been formed against us in this consumeristic world that really used to resolve around a factory that now resolves around your appetite. So, it was different. So imagine the medieval village. Imagine a picture, like a real easy picture to imagine is, you ever seen Mount Saint Michel or Mont Saint Michel? It's in France. It's this island, like perfect little mountain town. It's out on where the tides come in. It's beautiful if you look up Mount Saint Michel. But at the top of this like almost pyramid structure of a little island town is a cathedral, and the whole town revolves around the cathedral, and that's the highest thing. And everybody knows ontologically what is on top in the metaphysical, because it's on top in the actual. So you have a different experience about why the town is there, that all these shops are there to support the people to have a life in the kingdom of God on earth in the church. So when we get into the Industrial Revolution, and now like a town where I grew up in, where there's these old factory buildings that are getting turned into apartments because the whole town, everybody moved where there was work. And they were making gadgets for people they would never meet or never interact with. There were people in between them and the customer, and they were so disassociated with the fruit of their labor. And they saw the people on top making all of this money. And now there was still a church in the town, because you couldn't get people to come to the church with the town without the church. But eventually the priorities changed, and the church got moved farther and farther away. And that's what they talk about when they're talking about a post-Christian world. So we didn't feel that heartbreak happen to us, because we weren't the frog that was boiled slowly. We were the frog that we were born amongst frogs as a tadpole that was already in boiling water. So that's kind of like my short thesis on the subject is, okay, so what do we do now? Like, because you're not going back. And if you could go back, there would be better things. But also all of the errors and problems we have now were already there in seed form. So how are we going to move forward? And the only way I know to tell people is like a church like mine. Like we have the community, we have these things back. It's at the top of our community. It's really easy to be the top thing in Florida because everything's so low, it's so flat. But so when you walk into an Orthodox church, that ontology is visible. The proper structure, good architecture is the structure of a well-ordered soul. And so if you start to contemplate even just the very building itself I go to church into, you can start to see the ways you're disordered in the ways you ought to be ordered. And then you have a life in a community where we drink from the same cup. And, I don't want to say too much on that, but that cup has dramatically changed the way I see the person next to me. It's becoming harder and harder to find judgment for people that I would never become friends with in real life based upon our interests and our commonality. And yet it's like, we can't hug each other and say good things about each other enough. So it's I've had a re-enchanting experience in the church, and that's the only place I would tell anybody to go and find it anymore. Is in
Wow.
So a modern style church was just more of that same pickle jar for me, man. It was kind of, I think the culture is functioning like a Trojan horse in those things where
Mm-hmm.
we it's it's something Christians have historically done, where they've taken the pagan world around them and they've saw what was in common with Christ in the Christian story, and they tried to use that to communicate to the culture. However, how much of that can you take? How much of that outside supplementation can you take in before you're trying to, I don't know, shape the heavens like the earth instead of shaping the earth like the heavens? So I don't know where to send people anymore. So I tell them, hey, come with us.
Wow. Dude, that is a great answer, man. You made some great analogies there, and I could saw in the comments everyone was freaking out about it. No, you made a lot of good connections there, and I think you're 100% correct. Because I went to Texas to check out some stuff and meet some friends through the podcast and a project we're working on, which we talked about. And I went to this beautiful church, St. Maximus the Confessor in Denton, Texas, and that community you're talking about, I experienced it there. Like in abundance, including musicians. Like I met 3 or 4 musicians that I actually play on the show that I was playing before having met them. In fact, 2 of them, I had been playing them without even knowing I would eventually go to Texas to meet them. It was just surreal. And there was that, not only that community, not only that love everyone had for each other, you could feel the realness in the room, but then they were describing to me Pascha there, and they were describing to me like these gatherings where they have their service, they do their thing, and at the end they go out in the back and they jam while they're all eating with their families. And I was like, is this my new home, my musical home? Is this where I go next? Because I can't go back to the way it was. So I love the way you put that. It helped me actually what you just said, kind of because I missed that. I really missed those shows.
You need it. I mean, we all need it.
Yeah.
It's not just you, it's all of us. Even introverts need that.
That's true.
I don't know. Like, people and the world's really trying to reach for this. They're trying to create safe spaces, or like, I don't know if you've seen these interviews from the movie Wicked with Ariana Grande and her co-star. They're trying so hard to reconnect, but it seems so. It's like an honest effort, but the technique is ingenuine. And because we talked about in the podcast, we talked about this idea of like ancient civilizations across the board were always trying to bring the heavens to the earth in their architecture. Once they had the ability to make something of note or beauty or tall, they try to organize it around astronomical events. And I would argue that this is just a part of human anthropology, that we're all going to try to do that one way or another. And if you're going to have this horrible internal rebellion if you're looking into the world and you don't believe there's a God, or God could be many things, or he can be contradictory things, or that he doesn't exist at all, or the idea that people don't even acknowledge the existence of your own soul. Like that's like they talk about in Death of the World, like the soul, the soul will not accept that. It will not tell you, it's like someone's telling you don't exist. You're like, I exist. I'm right here. What are you talking about? Like your internal aspects of you are like that. And it creates this discord and this disharmony. And people, I keep using that phrase, the undescribing of the world. Even their own bodies have been undescribed to them through technology. We use the example often, I used it on Kyle's podcast, of birth control. Where people would have, of course, intuitively always known that sex and procreation go hand in hand, and that's its main purpose, right? But now it seems like people think, well, why would I deny myself pleasure? And why do I want to have kids? Because then I can have less pleasure. And so there's been this undescribing, and people are reaching, because all the things they're being sold are never going to be enough. They can never have enough of what they never really wanted in the first place. And what they really wanted was they're made to love the God they could not see with their own eyes. They have this in their hearts, and they were made to love each other. And with that break of fellowship with God and that break of communion in God with others, we're going to come up with crazy things and crazy ways to fill that void. I mean, I use the example, you can't have enough of what you never really wanted. I always use the example of hoarders in houses. When someone's just filling their house with junk and you try to help them get rid of it, you can't get rid of any of it. They'll agree that they should get rid of something, but they can't get rid of anything because they've actually used the stuff to replace the relationships they have with people and the relationship they should have with the church, which is in their soul, waiting to be fulfilled. And they're finding these counterfeit ways to fulfill it and getting quick little hits of, emotion and endorphins when they grab onto these things, and they find their identity in stuff. And it's not going to work. So that's why I say in the modern world, we just can't have enough of what we never really wanted. And I think we're seeing a mass awakening to that right now. I think you're seeing, like, there were people I talked to the other day that were worried because they were, I know everybody we're talking to is not Orthodox, but they were kind of like, oh, I feel like I'm late. They're becoming Orthodox. And they're like, oh, I'm late to the game. I'm like, I don't think so, man. I think the wave is just forming, and through the internet, and there's this people are actually connected with the history of what the church was, not a modernized church that has been thinned out into like mere Christianity. But mere Christianity actually is the full church. And so there's an awakening to that. And I think it's coming in part coming through like church history. It's like, what do we used to do? What do we used to believe? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is nothing like I have now. What I have right now is a product. It's something that was a transaction I went through, and I'm using it like people are using it like a drug, and they're using it all other kinds of ways. And the sad thing is that I don't think many of the people involved in this are willfully hiding the early church from people or the fullness of the church from people. They, like I said in the podcast earlier, we've all come in the middle of the movie, and we don't know what was going on in the early part of the movie. And the people we're talking to came in like a minute before us.
Right.
And they're just doing their best to explain the movie.
Right.
But the glory to God, there's a better explanation out there for what's going on. And it's one that's not so easily memed on by the media or atheists. It's too deep and it's too rich and it's coherent. So I think that's kind of what's going on right now. What do you think?
I definitely agree. And it's even happening with people that were born Orthodox and are coming back. I'm getting a lot of messages from Cradle as well. So I think it is. I think there's like a overall movement. I think people are tired of BS. Everything's a lie. Everything has no substance. Everything is just mundane at best. And then when it comes to Christianity, like you said, a lot of people kind of came in halfway through the movie. Now they're having questions posed towards them if they're posed in the proper way, where they makes them go, oh yeah, I guess where is that church that I heard about in Acts? Like I don't see this description everywhere, or Revelation, or like if they go as far as the Didache, now we're talking totally different. But then, I think people are asking this question, like, where is the substance here? Why isn't there a uniformity amongst all the 20,000 different Protestant denominations, or what's up? Even like the whole like Vatican II thing. Like I know a lot of Roman Catholics, they're like, yo, this isn't the Catholicism I was raised in. And they're just like, I think people are tired of being lied to. And I think that when it comes to the church, when it comes to Christ, people are starting to look elsewhere. I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah. And man, but it is so, like, it's so cool in the sense that, like, I mean, we're both dreamers and we're both artists, and so this is going to come a little more naturally to us. But it's almost like my experience prior to, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago was like Lord of the Rings. Let's imagine Lord of the Rings is the only story. Okay, let's just imagine that for a second.
Okay.
The only version of Lord of the Rings I was aware of was an updated version of Lord of the Rings, but it had no wizards. It had no rings of power. It had no magical objects. It had no elves and dwarves, and it didn't have Helm's Deep or even more important, Lothlorien or Rivendell. Now I'm getting really Tolkien nerdy for the people that don't know Tolkien. And then to step into Orthodoxy and realize, like, oh, this was the real Lord of the Rings. Like, look, we have sacred spaces. We have we have sacred relics. We have, we have help from beyond. We have wizards. Like, I mean, if you ever met an Orthodox priest, come on now.
True.
So I don't know. So like, it's kind of a cheap way to say it, and it might be a little polemic. But I'm not really talking about other people's experiences. I'm just talking about the way it came to me. I don't expect that analogy to fit for everybody. But that was like, that's part of the tears I have like still like on the regular. Like I like seldomly does a moment go by when I step into the divine liturgy, or a quiet moment in a Vesper service, like which is an evening service for us, or just praying with my family in the morning, and it like gets me. It like hits me right in the throat, man. Like, and then and it's hit me in the throat not randomly because of what it means. It's what again. It's like I suddenly, it was like I found the thing I was looking for my whole life that I never knew was there. Or like I could say it like an analogy with a girl. It's like with my wife. It's like, hey, she reminded me of a girl I was trying to remember that I'd never met yet. You know,
that's beautiful. That's good, dude. That's
good.
good.
And so it's like I've been trying to remember this girl, and I don't know where she is. I've never met her, and the church was like that for me. So I don't know what to say. I'm very proud to talk about it. Like, and I don't mean pride in like I mean, I was just say bold. Because I know people don't like it. I know people don't like it, and it's like, okay, but you get to say your thing. I get to say my thing. If you think my thing is stupid, you can move on. You know, I can move on from your thing. I have a lot of trust for an audience. I know that we live in a culture that says, oh, there's certain things you shouldn't say because someone's not going to like it. And it's like, well, man, like you can't say anything unless it could possibly offend someone. It's if let's just imagine you're going to try to help an addict. When you go, if you've done an intervention with an addict, it's fun. No, I don't mean fun. I'm kidding. But basically, any good you give them is going to sound like slavery or suffering. To tell them to change, that's what you have, but you can't get around it. You can't sugarcoat it. You can share the hope at the end of what their life could be like, but at the same time, the path to that hope is filled with pain. And it's, you know, and it's for the Christian, it's a moving from being bound to the demons to being bound to Christ. And that's where we find our freedom. That's why Jesus is an exorcist, because he's exposing that he is here to free our wills for the first time ever, right? Like that your will is trapped under lower desires that are leading you to the severance of your soul from your body. And that Christ he's here to restore that will. So I guess that's what I want to say about it. But yeah, so I feel like I need to be bold about it, because like I would just the same way I'd be bold about anything. It's like, hey, I found this great restaurant. Like I'd be happy to tell you about that. Why would I be afraid to risk the fact that someone doesn't like what I'm going to say? And you know, I'm not forcing anything on them. I'm just telling them my ideas. And if people can't listen to your idea, I guess dispassionately, at least a little bit, then they probably are insecure and need me in like some kind of moral therapeutic sense to prop up their idea, which is actually functioning more like propaganda in their own mind, and that's why they need me to do it. So.
Well, everyone seems to be saying the same stuff, that you have a very poetic way of putting things. I totally would hear Denise says this. I don't know if can you see that?
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Well, I do art, guys. Like this is the way. Like I mean, it's probably not good for me to think like this all the time, but hopefully it's helpful to all of you. Again, like we talked about that unveiling, is that I mean, because when people say poetic, like I'm not really a huge fan of poems a lot of times. Like remember having to read poems in school, and then I grew up, and then I could love poetry. But most people like are kind of annoyed by poetry. If someone's going to get up and read a poem, you're like, oh, great, there comes a poem.
I think it only works well in music, to be honest. If I could put it honest,
make it rhyme, and then you give it a melody, and people love poetry again.
Exactly.
So, this is what artists do, and you know, that's our role. It's a small role in the world, but it's like, hey, it's what we get to do. We get to hopefully make something that you've made flat round again, you know.
Yeah, that is the goal. Sometimes
hopefully.
Successful, sometimes hopefully.
Most people, when I'm talking to them, they're like this. I'm happy these people get it, but they're kind of like, woo, like what that guy, that's a word salad right there for you.
No, for sure. I'm sure like when you're talking to like non-Orthodox, some of this stuff, I mean, but I'm sure there's a lot of, have you encountered a lot of people that are not Orthodox, but when you start saying some of this stuff, they're more open-eyed, or do you find them kind of rolling their eyes?
So the people that roll their eyes the most are probably Protestant. And I don't mean that as an insult. I don't mean that as an insult. People I just talk to on the streets, they don't talk to anybody who talks like this, so they're actually interested, maybe even just a weird way. I don't mean street. I'm not on the street talking to people. I talk to everybody, though. My wife can attest to this. I try to make friends with people at the coffee shop I see every day. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you try to treat them like someone made in God's image?
Of course.
So, you know, I do that for those people, but the people that are most skeptical, I would say probably more reformed in the sense that they have a dogmatic, confessional, doctrinal way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've always realized that their confessions don't really jive in the way the world actually works sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so they see typology and poetry as a manipulation. Very often.
Yes.
So I don't know, I don't know how else to say it, but it's those people are most skeptical of, especially if I talk about biblical typology, I start to point out, hey, the symbolism of the Ark of the Covenant, or like, look at this connection here between these two things. And they have their categories, but so like when you start to launch into this, they're like, uh-oh, someone's trying to pull a trick on me because don't we need to go back to the Greek and the Hebrew, and don't we need to listen to John Calvin, or don't we need to read the Westminster Confession to find truth? And I was very delighted to find that the truth in the church, it actually better explains reality, doesn't explain reality in a way that separates you from it. You know, like, for example, I'll pick. Now, I'm not picking on people, but you got to think about this for a second. Like, your doctrine could be something like, God forces you to believe in him. Like, that's a doctrine that exists. It's determinism, right? And the problem with that is your experience will never tell you that. Your experience says, well, gee, I have free will. And then also that statement, as they try to define a couple of things, like, I think they're trying to do something good in the sense they're trying to take, let's take away the boasting. It wasn't on something we did. And it's like, I get that, but it actually leaves a bigger boast in the sense that, like, it wasn't something you did. No, God picked you before you were born. And he picked some people to go to the bad place before they were born. Makes no sense. That's not so helpful. I think that's kind of a dangerous thought. And also, it kind of erases over one of the most important aspects we see in Scripture. One of the deepest philosophical points, if you want to talk to a non-Christian about, is, what do you really own? What do you really own? Your house can be taken away. Your job, you can lose it. Your car, someone can take it. It could die. It could blow up tomorrow. You don't know. But your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, these are things that God gave you that he leaves with you. Those are yours. And he gave that to you as a gift so you could offer it back to him. This is what love looks like. We offer what we have back to each other. So if you want to know what you actually own and what you are free with, it's your heart, your mind, your strength, and your soul. These things are yours to do with what you will with, and God asks for them back. And I think that is so important to understand, because if we come up with a philosophy that overrides where your autonomy is, and how your autonomy is functioning as a God-given gift, we're going to have a major problem. So those people that believe that are very skeptical often of typological insights and symbolic insights. It's my best guess why. Because I used to be in those circles. Like, I understand why they believe what they believe. I understand the arguments for it. Which is also weird too, because when people talk about my thing, for example, they want to talk to me about their thing like I wasn't just sitting there. And I think the better question is, if they want to if they think what I'm doing is a problem, the better question is, what made you change your mind? What did you see? Right? Nobody wants to ask that. And I'm curious as to why. Like, I'd like to know why they don't want to ask me that. What did you see differently? They just want to restate the positions that I've already heard. And I'm not really into arguing that much. I don't like to argue about those things. But anyway, I'm really more of an artist. I'm not a theologian at all. Like, I could say these kind of things, but it really comes back down to my core competency is not as a theologian. It's not even really as an Orthodox person yet. Like, hopefully that would be my core competency before I die. And by Orthodox, I mean a Christian. Like, I mean a Christian in the church. I don't mean like a denomination. So anyway, I seem to do much better when I stick to poetic lanes. And if people don't get it, I can just leave them and understand that there's more people than me in the world to talk to them.
It almost seems sometimes like recently I've got a strong yearning to start making more music again. I took a little bit of a break, not on purpose. Well, just busy. Coming back to Orthodoxy kind of shook me on a level where I didn't know how to properly create again. I know that there is no, but you know what I mean? Like I was revisiting my craft, having left like hermeticism and that stuff. And now I'm back, I'm kind of orthodoxy. I'm trying to be careful with what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. But anyways, the point is recently I've kind of been like, okay, I feel it again. I feel that urge. I have to get back to it. Like I haven't done it in a while. And one of the things I like about songwriting and putting things in that poetic way is that I don't have to explain myself to people. I don't have to get into that disagreement with someone, because if they don't like the song, well, then just move on. But if you say something in that song that makes them go, what did you mean by this line here? Like, what is, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm happy you asked. Here's my answer. It kind of opens a conversation, a dialogue. Do you find that as well with your music?
Yeah, but that's like, okay, so when things are going well in the end, people are asking questions, or it opens up a bigger idea in their head and something to contemplate. Maybe it shakes up something that they needed to hear. I don't know. That's not how it comes to me, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
right.
I'm more of a flow state guy in the sense that I try to remove obstacles to my creativity and try to create a direct line between what is the beautiful things I've experienced, the dark things I've experienced. I try to leave a direct line with those and direct access. So when I sit down to write, I don't even know how to tell people I do it anymore, except that it's just there in a way. And that, I guess one of the things that happens is I'll be searching for an idea and something will create, like I said earlier, a lump in my throat. Yep. And I know I'm onto something when that happens. And I don't think about what it means to other people until I'm done with it. It's like, I don't know. It's almost like you're almost like you're ministering to yourself. Like I said, like earlier, I talk about problems I have in the world. I think about these problems, and for whatever reason, the answers don't come to me in like a psychological way. It's like, oh, here's your psychological problem. Here's what's really causing that. Like a little story will come to me. And I've written many of them down. I've turned a lot of them into songs and albums. And so with flow state, a big important thing is you don't allow yourself to get stuck for long. And you learn how to avoid being stuck, because that's when you start to second guess yourself and start to lose momentum. So really, I'm reliant on things to come to me, and they always seem to be there right now, thank God. And I wait for things to come to me, and then I chase after them. I chase them down. I wonder why they came to me, and I test them, and I look for ideas within them. And then if the ideas stop coming, I move on to one of my other ideas. I don't sit there and wrestle with the lack of an idea for too long, because you lose momentum.
Yes.
Right. So now the ideas stop flowing. Sorry. So I just move on. Sorry,
I didn't mean to jump in there. You got me really excited because when I talk to songwriters, there's very few I can relate to how their approach. I can completely relate with what you just said. I've never sat down and said, I'm going to write a song about this subject or whatever. Oftentimes, I will have like ideas or thoughts or like weird conversations I had in my head when I was even a kid. I oftentimes look at my music as a mirror to reflect back at me something that I haven't dealt with, or something that I have, just that kind of thing. Or sometimes it's just like an answer to a question I've had on my mind. A story will come in, because I'm also very much about writing stories as well. And a lot of my songwritings are like about characters, that I've come up with even when I was a kid. And then sometimes I won't even I'll have like a tidbit of an idea of a song or a story, and I'll kind of like store it away. And it's almost like it's not ready yet. It's like a seed that's planted, and it might take 2 years. It might take three years. This year it took 10. And I pulled out an idea from 10 years ago, and I was like, oh, so you're ready to be pruned. The tree is growing. So then I started working with it. Actually, you're the first person that described songwriting in a way I'm like, I know exactly what he's talking about. I totally know.
I do that. Yeah. Well, I do the same thing. So I hold stuff in my back pocket forever. Poor Kate, my wife. Like there was a thing that got turned into a song a riff that I've been playing for like 12 years.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know why I keep hanging on to it, but when I plugged the guitar in, I'd play this riff, and then it became a song. Yes. And then there are other things where it comes to me, I never thought about it before, and it comes to me in a minute, and it's done in 15 minutes. So I never know. But when you're talking about flow state, like if anyone's an artist in here and a writer, there's two things. So Pirsig talks about this. He's a philosopher. He came up with the metaphysics of quality. I think there's a lot of overlap with his metaphysical system.
So what's his name again?
Harmony in Christianity. So he talks about the two things that stop flow state are gumption traps and stuckness. So we talked about stuckness for a minute. So stuckness is, obviously when there's a lot of reasons you could get stuck. I'll just add some things I didn't mention about that are worth mentioning. One is that you don't actually think about these things deeply enough. Like you don't actually, you're not going out in the world and grabbing everything and storing it away like you could. You're maybe taking some of these things for granted, and like you have to look and you have to be like, so I'm just like, I can tell you're this kind of guy because I've watched your live streams, but I was just thinking about salt today again because we were talking about salt, and I was like, you know how you describe salt? The taste of salt? It's salty. Right? That's not like helpful. That means you have to have an experience with salt to know what salt tastes like. It's
Absolutely.
it's like a border. It's like an edge of a thing. It's like as far as an idea can go. It's like, chicken, you compare it to other things. You compare everything else to chicken, and there's other dishes that I could have a longer, complicated explanation of. But in the elemental form, we don't. So I'm thinking about these things, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That'll come back to me one day, like 3 years from now when I'm writing a song. Like there'll be something about that that's useful, and I'll slide it in. And I hung on to it for all those years. So collecting and categorizing the world through the proper symbolic framework will mean you will not get stuck nearly as easily as someone else who's just trying to come up with an idea. 2, gumption traps. Gumption traps are like, what steals your gumption? I know it feels like an old-timey word, like, darn it, avoid them gumption traps. But no, it's not. It's actually a really important word, because the gumption is, why would you ever release your music to anyone and put yourself under that scrutiny? We all know what we do to a song we don't like. We roast it, or, maybe other people do. I don't do it as hard anymore. But we just pick things apart that are presented to us, especially if the person that made them aren't in front of them.
Yep.
And every artist knows that's going to happen.
Yep.
And every artist knows, like, if you're making music, for example, it's different than making a film. Like, you can make a film like Jurassic Park, and like 95% of the population likes it. You can make a huge record like Thriller by Michael Jackson, and like 80% of the population can't stand you. And so you understand that that's inherent to music. So, for example, I'm a guitar player. It's like, well, there are people that don't care for guitar, and they don't care for guitar solos. So am I going to sit down and play guitar in a way that tries to win someone over that would never like a guitar solo? Or am I going to try to play a guitar solo that someone who loves guitar solo is going to be like, that's the best guitar solo? It's, you have to aim for the people that could like that thing. And so part of how I do that is kind of a little bit like, I hate to say middle finger, but it's if someone's not going to like it, I make sure they're not going to like it. Like, if I'm going to play guitar solo and you don't like guitar solos, well, you're really going to hate this one. Why? Because then the people who love it. So there's all kinds of ways you get stuck in gumption traps. And that's a very long conversation, but an artist should pay attention to their internal dialogue and see what's stopping them and where they're getting stopped in the process and why. Because it's actually a very terrifying process to record your thoughts into a piece of poetry that rhymes over music, and then go ask people to pay for that, and stand in front of them with your toes wrapped around the edge of the stage and say, hey guys, check out what I just did. That should be terrifying, to people.
It is.
And it doesn't terrify me anymore, because I've worked through the problem of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it did, like when I was young.
Yeah.
I remember having stage fright the first time I ever did a piano recital. Yeah. But you have to work on what's stealing your gumption if you're going to ever enter into a flow state of creativity.
That's an extremely good point. Before we go any further, what is the name of the author you were saying of that book?
Oh, Piercing. Yeah, I can't fully endorse the book, but I mean, you can read it like St. Basil the Great would tell you to read a secular work.
Right.
Because he does have another wonderful, the move from static to dynamic. It's a really good philosophy. It'll actually help you frame up some song ideas. So I thought that Zen, Zen and the Tao of Motorcycle Mechanics. It's not about Zen. I'm getting the title mixed up. Why? I just read it 2 years ago.
It's
actually a pretty helpful book if you don't read it like a documentary of a road trip.
Right.
You also understand that he's using that documentary of like this road trip with this guy and his son and his motorcycle as a metaphor for the creative artistic process and the process of thinking and testing and creating ideas.
Well, because I like the stuck in gumption. I have never had an issue, when they talk about, what is it called? sorry, the word's escaping me.
Stuckness and gumption traps. Stuckness.
No, it's when you have that block and you can't write.
Writer's block.
Writer's block.
You just said it like 3 different ways.
Yeah. So like I've never really had writer's block. I've always had this ability where it's like I switch on and off. And the gumption thing is so true. I've made a ass of myself so many times. I would say the first couple years I got on stage, and it took me a while, but like there's also an audacity to it. Like I remember my friends are like, "Yo, that was great." I'm like, "No, it wasn't." And then like the audacity to be able to get up there after you completely suck. It's gumption.
Oh man,
it's gumption.
Well, that was okay. I'll give you one example of someone who helped me deal with that problem. It was James Taylor's brother, Livingston Taylor.
Okay.
We're doing a show together for a huge audience, like probably like it's a beautiful performing arts center, and we're just jamming backstage beforehand. And I don't know if you know Livingston. He had a couple of hits in the '80s, but not as big as James. Better guitar player by a mile. Okay. And we're jamming, and he teaches performance at Berklee College of Music. And right before he's getting ready to go on because he was going on before us. I said, "Hey, listen, you teach this course. Like, if you could reduce your whole course into one thought that would help me the most, what would it be?" Mm-hmm. I just felt like that was like, yeah, I got this guy here. He teaches at Berklee. Like, what the heck? Let's see what I get from him. And man, I'm so glad I asked this question. I'm surprised by this answer. Really caught me off guard. Like how I'm building anticipation for what he actually said. It's called an artistic technique. So I'm teaching. No. Anyway, and I'm still pausing. So,
you certainly are.
Yep. So anyway, he told me, he's like, listen, he rubbed his chin. He didn't have a beard, and he was just rubbing his chin. He's like, okay, here it is. Some nights you're gonna suck, and it's your night to suck. Enjoy it.
It's good advice.
I was like, wow. And he said that talking to me, he already knew I was accomplished as a musician. He could tell I could play, and so. That's something you just can't say to everybody, because some people suck because they don't practice enough and they don't prepare, and then they like have this like, if I just build it, it will happen, and they'll show up and they're not ready. That's different than you're ready.
Yep.
And it's the dude, like most of the time it's a technical problem. That monitor shuts off.
There's so true.
Feedback. Sound guy's terrible.
Yep.
Broken string. You crack a fingernail. Whatever it is, I just played I played the Symbolic World Summit last year with a broken pinky. I broke 2 days earlier. And played on it the whole time.
Been there.
No, you don't want anyone to know, right? And so you might be having a bad time. Like my monitor's going in and out, my finger's broken, and it helped so much because it was like, okay, if you're doing bad and you start to focus on doing bad, you're going to do worse. Like if you're nervous, right, you're going to do worse because you're devoting energy to what you're afraid of and trying to avoid your fear instead of pursuing what makes music awesome. You start to put you don't want to devote any of your energy into the fear when you're on stage.
So true, man.
You want to devote everything into creating this moment for everyone. So it was so helpful because when those things happen, it's like you start to laugh about it, and you don't let it steal your gumption in the sense you're like, well, this is going to be a funny story later, or you know what I mean? It's like, well, let's see, because you'd be shocked at how many nights you thought it was bad, and everybody out there is like, whoa,
yes,
and because you didn't tell them. It was going bad for you.
That's so true.
That was just one tiny example of like what, like a gumption trap, and how in a narrative, a little meme you can give yourself to deal with that moment and laugh it off and just keep going.
I love it. It's been a while since I've been on stage, so I might have to use that. But I miss it so much. I can't wait for it to happen.
That's great.
Manny, we have some questions in the start. Do you want to throw them up? We got a few questions from the audience.
Yep.
To your broken finger thing, there was one. We had booked this. We're gonna film this out. We're playing this festival outdoors. We got like all these guys we paid to come like film us and all this stuff. And I had cut my hand like really bad like the day before. So I was like, okay, what do I do here? I'm not gonna cancel it. So I just went and I totally Stevie Ray Vaughan. I crazy glued my entire finger, and it was like stiff. I could barely move it, and I just played through it with like blood coming. It was it's the best.
I've done it. I've been bleeding.
Best. Yes,
I bled on my guitar. It's awesome.
Me too.
It's
it is the best
story. All right. So
It's so true. Okay,
sorry,
man.
Tyrone's asking a question. Is this the question for us here?
Yeah, here
New
we
York
go.
Times. Okay, so this is a New York Times just released an article about orthodoxy, and it kind of tried to reduce that it's attracting young men in numbers because it's masculine. I thought the article was cool. I thought it was cool that, like, my impression of what was happening was at least acknowledged by the New York Times. Not that it was because it was masculine, but that there is something happening.
Yep.
And that it was big enough of a thing happening that the Orthodox Church that the New York, the New York Times decided to comment on it. Okay. So I don't think that's entirely true. I think that is an aspect of it, in the sense that, we all know men don't like to complain about when men get the shaft in the culture as much as other groups complain, because I think that men who want to be masculine think we can take it, right? I mean, like, this is the kind of thing. It's like, okay, so one of the things I notice, like, when I'm around other musicians, like, they'll, like, we'll pick on each other a little bit, but they, like, people, like, go a little extra hard and pick on me. And when they do that, it's a compliment, because they're really kind of telling me, like, oh, they think they can get away with this, something they wouldn't do to someone else, because this guy can take it, right? Or maybe he's successful enough that, he could use to be knocked down a few rungs. That never bothers me. But where the culture is, I mean, so the problem is, like, this is what I'm going to say is going to really tick people off. The culture, like the feminist aspects of the culture, are proving Genesis true over and over again. And they've fallen right into it. And it's the idea that, listen, your desire is going to be for your husband to rule over him, right? It's telling you this is one of the problems of reality. And they're confirming one of the aspects of what it means to no longer be fit for access to Eden, right? So, well, okay, so when Christian men are seeing that, they're like, this is a problem, right? Because they're kind of watching, like, it's a joke Bill Burr makes, and it's a little unfair, but it's kind of funny, where it's like, these feminists, they're kind of like picking off a buffet. Like, they don't want to be a stonemason or a bricklayer or a roofer. They want to be CEOs and whatever. Like, who doesn't? I would love, there's a time in my life I would love to be a CEO. I'm not qualified. I'm a man, so I'm not qualified. So when they see that kind of talk and whatever, it's like, okay, there's just a moment happening in our culture. These moments come and go, and things gain prominence. And so I know I'm dancing on, like, a really touchy edge, especially for my audience too. But I'm not dissing women. I'm not saying women aren't awesome. Obviously, I've got, I don't even need to defend myself on that idea.
No,
women,
not at all, man. Not on this. Yeah.
Yeah, Kate's over here agreeing with me in the corner. So
awesome. Say hello from us.
Yeah, Kate, hello from everyone. She's over here agreeing. So but anyway, the thing is, I think that it does understand, like, so what people don't understand is, like, why are there male priests in Orthodoxy, and why are there no female priests, right? This kind of idea. And someone might answer, well, this is the way we've always done it. And what I said earlier about the architecture of the church is really important, because the people and where the people are is really important, because there is a relationship in the masculine and the feminine, in marriage, in life, in the world, in the universe, where they play two different roles. And these words are hard to use because they're confused now, but you could say women are the power and men are the authority. And this is how the heavens and the earth function. Okay. And so it's basically, this goes for a woman too. She needs to understand this, because she has the same exact inner cosmos in her body that I do when it comes to the way the spirit is divided from the body. Absolutely. In the sense that you have, your heart isn't your emotional center. We don't want to think of it like that. We want to think of the heart as like the throne of your volition, your will. It's the very centerpiece of you, and your soul is the one that decides between these things, right? Okay. And so the spirit, like your spiritual immaterial components, are symbolically masculine. Doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. Like the fact that you have an immaterial aspect of you, and in other words, the thinker in you, the decider in you, needs to have dominion over what your body is asking for. In other words, your body is going to ask you for all kinds of things, and you need to negotiate with your body about how to do that without your body rewriting the narrative. Because when the body rewrites the narrative, you become something like addiction would be a great example of this. So you're, let's just say food addict. This is a really tough category because food addiction is difficult because it's not like drinking or heroin where you don't need alcohol or heroin to survive. You need food to survive. So you're going to have to figure this problem out, right? It's very difficult. And, but the problem is like, okay, your body's asking for something. It's asking for food that you know is going to make you bigger, and it's going to put your body at risk, and it's asking you for food that's going to actually not help your energy levels in the long run. It's stuff that you know is off of the plan. And when the body has dominion, that argumentation, that mob yelling at you has the power. Now, body sending you appetite information, that's a good thing. Like you need to know what it needs to support it. And so the problem is in the church has a head and body relationship. And so symbolically, the men represent the immaterial spirit and the women represent. Now, when I sit in an Orthodox church in the body, I'm in a feminine role. I am the bride of Christ, right?
Okay.
So this is a really hard thing to understand for people. And I've probably just gone said 1,000 things that people don't understand the definitions of what I'm using and trigger them. But I think what I'm saying is really important to understand for everybody why the church is the thing and its standard its standard. It doesn't mean that you couldn't, like when it comes time for a homily or doing the liturgy, it doesn't mean that there isn't 10 women in the room that you could just ask to do those things and they could do it. Of course they could do it. It's not why they're not being picked. It's not because they're not capable in thought and deed. It's because of the symbolism of it, and the symbolism matters. So our culture has conflated power and authority. This is the same move that we're talking about. They see roles of authority as roles of power. And this, I mean, we could get a longer subject, but this is the problem with tyranny, right? Is that the person at the top, the dictator, creates too efficient of a path to order around and move the body. So it doesn't negotiate both ways. So let me give you an example of this. This is the difference between a centaur and a horse and a rider.
Okay,
we're gonna get weird now.
All right, now that's why I'm smiling, man. This is gonna be awesome.
Okay, so we don't want to think of the centaur the way we think of them in modern films or like in a C.S. Lewis novel.
Okay.
We want to think of a centaur because C.S. Lewis actually understands what I'm about to say. He understood this, but he was using these enchanted creatures as an example to the spirited world rushing back in on a world that tried to kill it off, right? And so all of the spirited things in his story are sort of like a good. But if you go back to when centaurs started appearing in, Greek mythology, you don't want to like leave your family alone with a centaur. Like you don't want to cross a centaur. They have this incredibly strong body with efficient action to it. So this is kind of the joke we make when we see a bodybuilder. We're like, people have this impression that they're not very smart, although there's very smart bodybuilders. The reason why is because we intuitively and symbolically understand that the bigger and stronger you make the body, the stronger its appetites and its ability to act in the world will be, right? And it can make stronger and stronger demands on the intellect. So the centaur has too efficient a path between its authority and its power, and actually what ends up happening is that the power takes over in the end. And this is like okay, so and then what happens next is a horse and a rider. So here's why a horse and a rider is better, because as a horse owner, I need to serve my horse, I need to take care of it, and as a horse, it's stuck just doing horse things, which are beautiful in a way, but it can't participate in a narrative, a bigger story. So when I negotiate and I teach that horse to follow the commands, right? Now, and then I take care of that horse and I show it love and I bring it food and I care for it. It can now function in a higher way, meaning that I now own a new pair of legs because I've learned to negotiate with this thing, because I've earned the right to ride with this animal, because I've respected the animal to the point I can learn to ride with it. Now I have legs that can carry me farther on a human mission. Let's just say it's a mission to deliver the mail or deliver Bibles in a far off country. Now I have a better pair of legs that I can negotiate, that I've negotiated with and have. So I can go farther in a shorter period of time. So I gain more by showing my authority properly. There's more power. And by power, the horse now that was in this natural lower pattern now gets to participate in a higher story ontologically. It gets to be part of, like, let's just say I give some noble, like delivering the mail to people, like the Pony Express or something like that. Sure. I'm sure there's some animal activist who's like, those ponies were abused. That's not the point of my story. I probably wouldn't argue with you on that. They probably were abused. You know what I mean? I'm talking about a good scenario here.
Yes.
So the fact that the person on top has to negotiate with, respect, and serve what's below it is why it's the proper authority, right? So when we set up systems in place that there's too efficient of a path for just by decree, by fiat, for a king to say, make it so, and the people against the people's will and their best interest, that's when you get into totalitarianism. So these structures are so important to understand because this structure is just as innate to me as it is to a woman. There's no difference in a man and a woman in the sense that we have a body and we have a spirit, and we need to negotiate to those two things. And how they've been symbolically delivered to us wasn't our decision, wasn't an act of our will. It was an act of God patterning the world a certain way. So we can't like when I'm talking about the undescribing of the world, when we undescribe these patterns, now we get dumb. Now now we can't see what women have to actually offer, which is entirely essential. In fact, that women think it's actually noble to not offer those things now. And for men, I mean, I don't want to get into a more controversial subject, but there's, some really, really direct versions of that. So motherhood doesn't become as important. All these aspects that have been traditionally like even, I'm not requiring my wife to be like some kind of like, domesticated woman, but like, it's wonderful when she cooks, she makes a meal in sacrifice for the one she loves. Like the fact that that's been framed up as like some kind of low, terrible thing is like, good Lord. Like, guys, what do you like? You're cutting off the ways we love each other. Like so offering ourselves for each other is what we do. This is what love is. And the culture is describing about your independence and your rights. And instead of this free giving, and Christ exposes this. He doesn't just take the kingdoms for himself when the devil offers it to him in the temptation. He said, you can have all of this. You know, all this power. And he's like, no, because he's here to serve, right? He's here to serve. And so we really need these structures to stay in place because the church is where we see things as they truly are. And if we compromise on the way things truly are, we're going to pay the price because it's not just on this flat horizontal man to woman and how we interact with each other that is at stake. It's everything. It's the way you see the sun, the day, the night. It's the way you see your own body. It's the way you use your own mind. So these structures are profound. I feel like I may have overshot like where people's understanding of these things are.
I don't think so.
So anyway, the masculinity in the church, I would say it's not that it's like masculinity is strong in the Orthodox Church. Like everything's strong in the Orthodox Church. It's that as a man who has a specific role in the world and needs to understand that, and needs to even understand themselves and understand the relationships with women, the Orthodox Church gets this right. And the world gets it dead wrong. So if you want to say men are coming to church because of masculinity, no, I don't think that's it. I think it's because it gets the category correct is what they can see.
True.
So it's not about like, oh, I get to dominate as a man. It's like the women do most of the stuff in my church. Like the church would fall apart without them.
100%.
They just don't stand there and prepare the Eucharist on Sundays.
Yep.
So like my argument would be, this is a long answer to that question. I'm gonna have to go faster if we're gonna get through questions. But this is one that you have to take a long time on.
I think you
had to say
have
all that to get to this point. I don't think it's because it's masculine. I think it's because it understands the categories, and the masculine people understand how to fit into that category. And it doesn't mean they're everything to the world, but they have a place in this world. And the world says they don't. They say we're all the same, or that you're less, or that you're naturally worse than the other gender. That's dumb. Let's stop 100%. That. That's a zero-sum game. That is the idea that like I can bring myself up by bringing you down. No, we both go down because we're tied together, whether we like it or not. There's not going to be people if we don't cooperate. So you better think that the other person at the other end of the bargain, whether it's a man or a woman, is made in God's image, is something honorable and dignified, and you better treat it as such. or you won't have a world that you exist in the future and your family exists in the future.
But the one problem with having these conversations with you is there's so many clips I have to make out of these episodes.
No, don't clip that. No, I'm kidding.
No, I really like that you took the time to go deep on that one, because I think what you just said here in all of this, you really summed up a lot of the issues that we see out there culturally speaking in the first world countries, and I think you nailed it. I think you're 100% correct. The one thing about that article is it's the way that they chose to kind of make it clickbaity, that they made it all about that.
Yeah.
But I think what I constantly keep hearing that men are coming to the church, which is true. But I've been seeing a lot of women coming to the church too, and looking for ways to kind of find that connection back to motherhood and stuff like that. Not in a trad wife sort of sense, but in a realistic, you know what I mean, like that. I'm not talking about that little clique. I'm talking about in like actually participating in the sanctification of marriage, of community. And you're 100% correct. I've said it before in my podcast before. As a kid, I remember the church, the community centers, all would have fallen apart without those crazy Greek ladies screaming at everyone. Like they would have completely fallen apart, and honestly, they held everybody together. I remember even the priests, when they'd have issues, they'd walk around and then they're like, "What do you need, Father? What do you need? I got you." And then he's like, "I can figure it out." No, it's like it's so true. Man, you nailed that question. How much time do you have?
Oh, I can keep going. Let's go.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Manny, throw up some questions. Dude, you just completely killed me with that one.
Thanks, man. All right, what do we got next? Let's do it. Who is it?
All right, Manny.
Sent to me from Christina.
Can you hear him?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
She says, piling knowledge on top of impurity. Could you talk more on that, in particular towards people just now finding the church?
Oh, okay, great. Okay. So let's think about it this way. Piling knowledge on top of impurity. A sword. Let's just use a sword. I think I use that in the example. You can give a sword to one person and they use it to defend what is good. You give a sword to another person and they use it to tyrannize.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
There's a sword. The word of God is a sword. Let's just say it that way. It says in Scripture. What's the difference? It's the heart of the matter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you could take something very good and apply it the wrong way at the wrong time. And especially for some low reasons. Like you could say what's absolutely true. Like the whole facts don't care about your feelings. I'm like, that's a dumb discussion. Like I get why people are doing it, but I just think I'm not going to frame up the world. The facts don't care about your feelings. Like, why have we separated these things? Like I'm truth, like you say, man, like truth is a who, not a what. And so, we're talking about relationships here in those kind of things. But anyway, impurity, this is why purity is important. So what's going to happen is people come out of traditions that are more Gnostic than Orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. Very often, like if someone comes to church and they don't understand what they're walking into, they're going to be waiting to hear a long TED talk and some music they relate to.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So then they walk into it, they're like, I didn't get much out of that. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah, we go to church for kind of different reasons, don't we? It's like, okay, I go to church for the mysteries, like in the Eucharist, like I go to church to pray with my community. We go to stand because we have a job to do, right? I do receive. I am fed in more than one way, in a very literal way, in a very in a strictly spiritual way at the same time. But I'm there with other people. Like the we of this is really important, right? Like the we. Like I'm at church with other people. We are giving our amen together, right? We're acting as one mystical body. That's what it means to have a mystical body, when people have different parts and they all somehow cohere in a direction. This happens all the time, and so the spirit that runs that is really important. So anyway, getting back to the point, to make it shorter, what's happening is people are coming out of these traditions where they're just being fed information all the time, and they've been going to church waiting for that piece of information that's going to fix their problem. They don't know enough, but they've defined the word know wrong. Like it's know, KNOW is to have experience with the fact, with the wisdom has become understood and is embodied in fact. It has to knowing, you know your food when you eat it, you know your wife when you make children. This is how the Bible uses that word. So not head knowledge is the way our culture uses this word. This is a bad category. So people are coming in gnostically sometimes.
Yes.
And I know this because this is how
Yes.
it was for me at first, until like I like started to catch on.
Yes.
Like I was like, oh, something's going on differently here. I just don't need a lot of information about the Orthodox Church.
Right.
Like I need to become devoted to God.
Yes.
And
Amen.
so
Yeah.
there's a purification that the catechumen process is really supposed to be mainly in a big way about purification first. That's why they say purification, illumination, glorification. Because if I just throw the right knowledge on there, we see Satan using scripture, don't we? Like we see when he's tempting Christ, right? He's trying to he tries to use scripture.
Yes.
And he tries to twist things. He tries to say things that are factually correct, right? In a way that manipulates your feelings to feel differently about them. So blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. So the people arguing online, and I'm afraid so many of them are just not in the practice of the church, and who are acting in this kind of way, they're not in the practice of the church, and they haven't gotten to the bottom of their purity, internal purity issues. And you're never gonna, I don't know if you'll ever be perfectly pure of heart, but we're given a lot of help by God in this, in the church.
Amen.
I mean, this is one of the things we're given access to through baptism and confession. So baptism, confession, fasting, praying, the denying of yourself, the mortification of your bad desires, these things are way more important to you than gaining all the things you could learn about the theology of the church. Theology matters. I'm not dismissing that. But if you can't do one without the other.
Oh man, this is and a lot of what you just mentioned here has been on a lot of our minds, and people in the chats, private conversations I've had with people. I know even as you were answering it in my head, I was thinking of people that are in the chats that we've talked about this. We've talked about this on my live streams as well. Everything you just said there, I think, yes. I fully agree with you, and I think it's something that we need to kind of start dealing with sooner rather than later, so that we're not damaging the online Orthodox, tagline, whatever you want to call it. I think you're 100%
these
correct.
Things you're learning are meant to be applied to yourself.
That's right.
Like the high standard is for you.
That's right.
Because I dare you, pay attention to know yourself. Pay attention when you observe someone else doing something wrong. Yep. And you're going to notice you're probably sinning as a result.
Correct.
You're either in judgment of them, right? Yep. Or you might be tempted by the same thing.
Yep.
There's all kinds of ways we can. It's very hard for a Christian to observe faults in other people and not fall into some kind of fault themselves. The St. Paul warns us of this. You can even fall into the same sin. People do this all the time. So this is why it's so important to be attentive to yourself, because you're gonna do that. Like if you're paying attention to what other people are doing wrong, even outside of your tradition, even more so outside of your tradition, because they're outsiders.
Yes.
That's God's. That's not yours. And so when I see this kind of pattern and this zeal of people coming in, it's like, yeah, thank God they want to learn these things, right? But by all means, like don't hand a sword, to an angry person. Like that's all I can say. Like this is a sword.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. That's so true. I like how you had put it in one of the interviews. I think it was the one that you did with Kyle about St. Peter, the sword and the ear.
And
can you just, because I think that's a really good image, and I think that really, like, to me, when I heard that, I was like, within seconds, I'm like, I know exactly what he's talking about. That makes so much sense.
Yeah. So there, I think, which gospel is it where he's told to bring a sword?
I think it's John.
I don't know. What?
I think it's John.
Okay. And so, and when in doubt, I just say it's John. Because he does include a bunch of things the other people don't include.
Yeah.
So anyway, here come the Romans. The Romans are the outsiders, right? So when we see a Roman at the cross, a centurion who's like, surely this was the Son of God. That's a prophecy about the conversion of the Roman Empire. Like this is the kind of typology you can learn in Orthodoxy over time. But there's all these moments where we're seeing a picture of what's going on and what's happening in the future. So Peter takes the sword when the Romans come, and he cuts the ear. Like that's not arbitrary. Like do yourself a favor when you're hearing, like if you're sitting in service and you're hearing the gospel being read and you're hearing Now, obviously, it's a little easier to understand the epistles that it's not arbitrary, but we assume that things happen. Like there's arbitrary elements to things that happen. I don't think there's a single thing that you should assume is arbitrary in the Bible. So there's all kinds of places that Peter could have hit them. He hits them in the ear, right? And Jesus puts the ear back on.
Mm-hmm.
He stops Peter and he puts the ear back on because Jesus is not going to come out and take over the world like that. I mean, he's got the biggest sword in the universe. Like, I mean, it's he's unmatched. He's matchless. There's nothing that he couldn't take by force. You know, but that's not part of his character and what he's doing in us. It's love that's driving this forward. So in laying down of his own life is how he puts the ear on the Romans. So that goes for us that want to argue online.
I love that. It's very true. Manny, you got a few more questions?
Yeah.
So we'll wrap it up real quick. We'll just do a couple more questions. I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
Okay.
All right. What does Joseph Beard say here? Here's a real quick question for Neil. What lessons can the Orthodox artists learn from Protestant music and art that has come out of over the years, past few decades? That's a good question.
Over the years, well, past few decades. Let's go back farther. Most of our Christmas carols, we'll even sing as Orthodox. Like if you like Orthodox go out and have a Christmas carol night, they'll sing "Joy to the World" and they'll sing "Hark the Herald Angels." And I mean, these things are not unorthodox in any way. There was, you know, I mean, there was this weird switch that happened in art, in Christian art, and happened, I think, around time of Handel, you know, who wrote Handel's Messiah. Handel's Messiah, which was like a sacred work, was being performed outside of churches, and that was like a new thing. It's like, oh, we don't do it that way out there, right? So, like, the older Christmas carols were veiled. They're like, we saw three ships at night, and Good King Wenceslas, and Richard Rollins actually talks about this with Jonathan Bichot on a podcast. It was really good. But they're more analogous and veiled. So those who had ears to hear could hear it. And so there used to be a bigger consideration about like the message outside of the church isn't as helpful as it is in the church, right? It's out there. And for like, you hate to say it as swine, but like casting your pearls before swine is that you don't want to necessarily put those things out there in a way that's going to be trampled on. Problem is Pandora's box has been opened. The internet exists. Books exist, right? Like the idea that like we're going to hide these mysteries, like if they've been written down once, anybody can see them, anybody can hear them. So I think Christian art is playing a slightly different role. So I like to look at Christmas carols as that because they're good. They're moving. They're memorable. They've lasted for a reason. So those are some of my favorite Protestant works. I think there's some incredible bands like Second Chapter of Acts in their stuff in the 70s. They did an album about the Roar of Love. It's incredible. Things like the Chronicles of Narnia, like I wouldn't really say it's Protestant. Well, it's Anglican. I guess that's Protestant enough. It's protesting against the Catholic Church. So I mean, these things are wonderful, and I really gain a wealth of knowledge from this type of art. I think where we fall into a problem is when that starts to take the place of the altar in Protestantism, right? So what happens is that there is no altar anymore in most of those churches. I mean, some people might be bringing it back. I don't know. It's like you can't really say anything about Protestantism without saying something that someone who's a Protestant that doesn't. They're like, we don't do that, or we do that. It's so many. There's so many, so it's almost impossible to comment on. But let's just talk about modern style churches that don't really even have a cross sometimes. They don't have any religious art, and it kind of looks like a nightclub where someone just took the beer out of it or something like that sometimes.
It does. It's true.
Yeah. So what happened is that it's the opposite of how. Like if you look at Byzantine chant and why the liturgy developed and the style and art and like what you might even call out from an outsider as pageantry, this was art designed to deliver that message. Rock and roll, blues, I'm a fan, huge fan. They're way too limited to carry that message. And in fact, like I said, pickling in that jar earlier, it carries the same juice that the rest of the world is involved in. So guess what? If you want to import rock and roll culture into your church, you're going to get rock and roll culture into your church. And we know what that's like, right? You're going to get people idolizing cute worship leaders. And you're going to get worship leaders wondering about like, I don't know why I feel so iffy about this. I feel like I'm drawing too much attention to myself. It's like, yeah, you are. So, I mean, I don't mean to be critical. I'm talking about like good friends of mine too that do this. So, so the problem it's not that these forms of art are bad at all. It's just that we're bringing heaven to the earth in the church. It's revelation, the light coming down, and then that informs us. We're not going around and looking at things out there and just pulling them in. Now, there is a way you can do that, but I don't even want to get into that right now, because it's really more of a balance of that happens slowly over time, is where the true church becomes more like the community it's planted in, and informs that culture, and then culture informs it back, and you'll notice style differences, but it's more like a flavor. It's not the meat itself that's being changed. If I was going to use a cooking analogy, so that it's a hard thing for people to understand, because they want to argue back and forth about these things. But I'll just say, like, it functions like a Trojan horse. You bring the culture from the world into the church, you're going to get that culture in your church. I don't know how else to say it. And we need the church to help us survive and better that culture out there and inform that culture. So it's too thin of an idea. It's too thin of an idea. Yes, by all means, play Christian rock, play Christian pop, whatever, dance, like, enjoy those forms of dance music in their right place. And modern things and modern art in the right place. But by all means, like, don't do that. I mean, there's a longer conversation to have too about, like, the proselytizing of sometimes Christian art, where it's like, it's really hoping to, do a thing to the audience. We talked about that on the podcast, so I don't need to get into that. But, they're trying to send a message. It's like, that's not how art functions. Actually, if the best things I do, I don't fully understand. Like, I tapped into something that I don't have a full grasp on. And so when I talk about people digging, they can dig forever, because I'm digging forever over there too. So that's good. But the whole, like, I'm going to make a movie to save people. I'm going to make a picture that saves people. I'm going to make a song that saves people. Like, come on. No, don't
intention.
Don't fall to that trap.
So true. It's so true. Yeah. It's the intention of it too. Like, a lot of it. Like, totally. Manny, do you have like 10 more minutes?
Sure.
Tops? Okay. What do you got, Manny? All right. Question from Tatiana. Question for Neil from Tatiana. Do you and the wife ever tour with your band? And would you be willing to come to Hannibal, Missouri to play?
Yeah. Hannibal, Missouri. Do you have a car? Could you get maybe to St. Louis, Kansas City? So yes, we don't tour much because of the kids in school. So we have 4 kids, and I didn't want to be that dad like you see in the movie. He's like, my dad's not home. He's a rock star. Or like you see in the beginning of the movie Hook, like, Peter Pan grew up and now he's never there for the kids' baseball games. I couldn't do that. Like, they have to be planted somewhere. So we've never been able to tour as much as we wanted to. So we kind of did what the Beatles did. We're like, we're really going to focus on big records. But guess what? 2025, we're going on the road a little bit. The kids are getting older. They're old enough to come around with us. Definitely in the summertime next year. We're going over to England in February, and we're probably going to be around Alabama to Florida in March. And then hopefully I'd like to do, I'd like to not lose money. And so, cause that can happen, too, but also, also I'd like to, do a series of house shows maybe. So anybody out there who's like, if you want to message us, and you've got like a home and you're totally willing, like, I guess, guys, our fans are all type of people. There's all types of people. So if you're willing to open your home and you've got a piano, and I'll bring a guitar, Kate and I will come and sing.
I love it.
Because I'd rather do, like, instead of 3 hours of music, I'd rather do 8 songs and we talk and we tell stories and we hang out and we have a little food or something. So if anybody would be amiable about that, we're starting to field requests for house shows.
Well, once we get the Texas thing going, don't worry. I'm going to have a string of shows for you guys. Make sure you get paid through Texas. Come down and chill with us.
Yeah, bring it on. I want to be there.
We're doing it. All right, man, you got a couple more? Because I don't want to take up too much of Neil's time. What? Oh, Mano, Neil, Buck, band, when?
Oh, Buck Johnson?
Yeah, Buck Johnson. I think he was in the chats. I think he's still here. And we should throw Father Turbo on bass on that. That's a super orthodox bass. Oh, yeah.
Slapping the bass.
Oh, yeah.
So, what about Justin Marler there? Get him in there too? Okay,
he's in Texas too. Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it.
Because originally we were talking about I was joking around. I said it. I threw it out there a couple times, and nobody had said no, including Buck, including Father Turbo, including Justin Marler. So now you're in the play. Like none of them said no. None of them said no. None of them said no. We were like, I don't know, would Father Turbo do it? And he's just like, That was the answer he gave me. I was like, this could happen. it's like, who knows? All right, next one. Joseph Beard says, I have a question.
Joseph Beard, he would know. He's the beard judge.
He is.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
He's got a proper beard,
I touch it too much on podcasts. Someone made a video. It's on a channel. I think it's called 5Z. And he made a video. It was a drinking game. Every time I touched my beard, he would have to take a shot. And it was a joke, of course. But within like 30 seconds, he was on the floor. Was the joke, because I touch it so much, especially the mustache. Like, you know, I'll start twirling it. That's why I try not to look at my video on camera, because I do that less if I can't see myself. But today I had to look at it because I'm on a phone, because I didn't have my setup working. So
it's part of having a beard. You're always pulling on it or something. It's like it's there. It's there. All right, Manny, what do we got? One more left. I want Dirt to rate Mano's beatbox. No, come on, man. We're not doing no beatbox.
Man, you got a bunch of trolls in here.
Mr. Moldy, he's always trolling. He's a good brother. I love that guy. He's awesome.
Yeah. I saw some of his comments earlier. He's funny.
Oh, he's always like he's always around. He's always supporting everyone's. He's always like offering some really good comments. Really good comments.
Yeah, that was my family environment growing up. So like, if I'm around people that don't tease me, I kind of don't trust them.
Exactly.
And, you know, it's like I'm like, oh, really? Okay.
Exactly. He's that guy that I've said this publicly on streams. He's that guy that when you're not around, he defends you like to the T. He'll back you to the nth degree. You know what I mean? He's that good. He's that guy. I love those guys. Those guys are the best.
Did he grow up in Massachusetts or Rhode Island or New York? That's kind of how they are.
It's so true. That's true. That's so true.
Did. That was our love language, man.
Oh, of course.
We were hard to get in with, and we weren't we were pretty critical, but I mean, we'd kill people for you.
Oh yeah, the loyalist guys. If you can, you got to have a bunch of guys around razzing each other. That's the only way to keep each other in check, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my brother. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Any final thoughts or words? You always have so many great ones. So if you got something to say, go for it.
I don't know, man. I think I'm probably out. You
don't have to.
No. Like again, man. I think. Man, I like what you're doing with your channels. You know what's so hard about like the world right now is that I love how much access people have to technology and even musical equipment. Like, but at the same time, there's so many people doing it. It's hard to tell. It's hard for people to tell the great things from the good things.
Yes, sir.
You know, and I remember this because I use this analogy. It's a story. I remember I was playing soccer in grammar school or football. I was playing, and man, I was doing pretty good in my league. I was scoring a lot of goals, and I was sad because no one who went to my private school I was at played soccer in my league, so nobody knew like that was part of my identity. And I'm an insecure kid, and I'm trying to form my identity. And so finally, like a gym class one day, they're like, "Hey, guess what we're playing today?" I'm like, "What?" "We're playing soccer." I'm like, "Oh, my moment to shine. I'm gonna mop the floor with these kids." I get out there on the floor. They drop the ball, and there's way too many people on the court already. Like there's just like there's probably like 30 people in my gym class, and everybody's playing soccer at the same time. There's no subs, and this mass of children just start running into each other where the ball is and kicking each other in the shins. And every once in a while, the ball would pop out and get near the goal, or some random goal would happen, or someone would score a self goal. But there was no place to showcase. There was no place to showcase like my particular skills I developed, and it was very sad. And I think that's a good analogy for like YouTube and streaming and music and stuff right now, because there's so much noise. It's hard for people to tell the difference between something good and something great, and it's hard for the great things to cut through. But I wanted to encourage you because I like the format, what you're doing, your editing. I think it's really, really great. And
thanks, man.
And so the secret for that is it takes a long time, but you just stick with it, man. And your plans for Texas, these are good plans, man.
Thanks, brother.
Just in my eyesight, I'm not like giving you some kind of prophetic moment or, priestly blessing to go do these things. I'm just saying, man, it sounds like great idea. I love what you're doing, man.
Thanks,
and
dude.
I'm excited to see it cut through.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate that. And for the record, I do have my church father's blessing and a few others. So.
Hey, that's all you needed. You don't need mine.
No, but I'm saying, and then adding a lot of other people
that
I value their words and their, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you, man. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate your music. And it's something that I'm looking forward to the new album. And as you described it on the show, I'm really looking forward to that. So please keep me posted on anything you do.
Just so people know they can follow us anywhere. Like you go to dirtpoorrobins.com and find all the different social links. But I mainly do most of my work on YouTube, and when there's something new, I'll put it up on YouTube or Instagram. So you can do that. We've got more music coming from Firebird, the last 3 songs in the deluxe edition, or 2 songs and a third bonus kind of extended track coming out in February. And then we're on to, again, we're working on the film Christianities and hopefully working on the soundtrack for that. Nothing's been in writing yet, so that's why I say hopefully, but that's the plan. And then we're also going to be starting to trickle out that new project next year that I told you about. So, yeah, stay in touch with us. If you were here, I'd love to hear from you guys, hear what you 100%. Thought. And if you got a house for a house show in the summer,
I can help you out with that. So we'll stay in touch 100%.
I'm coming to Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. I can easily set you up in Mexico real good, especially with the Texas project is connected to Mexico. So they kind of go hand in hand. So
nice.
100%, brother. If you ever need any help from us, please let us know. We'll stay in touch as we have been. And thank you so much for coming on the show yet again, brother. I really appreciate your time and your words. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody for the comments and the chats. You're all a lot of fun and kind.
I'll make sure you get all. I'll send them all to you because I keep getting a bunch. So I'll send you some private ones that I got. They're awesome. Adios, brother. Have yourself a good one, man. Take it easy. All right, guys. That was awesome. As I'm sure I'm not the only one that thought that was incredible. I have a lot of editing ahead of me, it seems. Some final words and thoughts from me. Basically, I'm just blessed to be able to have conversations like these. I don't know what I could say more than that. I'm just blessed to be able to have conversations with such amazing people. I really look forward to having more conversations. I have a couple of episodes dropping soon. Our dear friend Posh Sava, that should be coming out soon. I'm going to start editing. I already started editing yesterday. I'm going to complete most of the edits hopefully soon. I'll let you guys know when that's dropping. Jason Mirachuk Now. He was on the show. We recorded it Friday. Hopefully, I'll be able to drop that next week. A bunch of clips are going to be coming out soon. What else? I think that's it, man. Am I missing anything in terms of updates? We're thinking about a new Bored No More episode. We're going to be dropping that, some ideas out there. See if, who we can get. Anyways, now I'm tired and hungry, and I'm jabbering. Honestly, if you haven't checked out the episode we did with Neil earlier today, the premiere, please, Manny, throw that in the chat if you don't mind. Go check that episode out. It really is mind-blowing. This live stream that we just did now, I'm going to probably do some edits on that and drop this out as well. Neil is fantastic, remarkable. Check out all of their music. All the links are in the description. Manny's been throwing all the Dirt Poor Robin links in our chats. Please go support our brothers and sisters out there trying to get things going with their music projects, which are remarkable and incredible. So let's support them, as best way we can. And I can really feel it. My energy level just dropped a lot. I'm super hungry. The fast, I've been sticking to it. I did some heavy deadlifts this morning, and I could feel I'm super hungry, and I can't have a steak. I want a steak, but I can't have a steak. All right, brothers and sisters, I'll see you guys soon. Have yourselves a wonderful evening. Adios. Love you guys.
What's happening, man? What's happening? What's happening?
Bored no more.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? This is the Bored No More Network. bored no more. What's happening?